I was sipping my morning coffee at my desk when a message from my boss lit up on my phone screen. Lisa, meet me in the conference room on the third floor. In 10 minutes. No greeting. No explanation. Just a cold, single-line message from someone I had worked with for over 17 years. I set down my coffee cup, my eyes flicking over to the computer screen where the financial plan for the next quarter still sat unfinished. Everything I did was meticulous, organized, and done with care. That's why, for more than a decade and a half, I had always been kept on promoted, rewarded, and occasionally entrusted with leading critical projects whenever directors left. I adjusted my blouse, nodded at a few younger colleagues hunched over their screens, and stepped into the elevator. A vague sense of unease passed through me, that quiet instinct women in their 40s often have when they can feel something's not right approaching. The door to the conference room opened and I saw James, the CEO, already seated inside. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. There was no sign of appreciation for someone who had dedicated nearly 2 decades of her life to the company. Have a seat, Lisa. His voice was low, firm. I sat down, my hands resting on my purse on my lap out of habit. Lisa, James said, not looking directly at me, his eyes scanning a stack of papers in front of him. After 17 years, your current salary is too high for the value you're contributing. I said nothing. My mind reeled with those 2 words, too high. We've decided to terminate your employment. Effective immediately. Your email was deactivated this morning. In just 3 sentences, my entire career at the company was neatly packaged, finalized, and shoved out the door like an old coat left behind. I stared at him for a moment, trying to see if there was any trace of regret, any flicker of guilt in his eyes, or just cold, calculated efficiency. Thank you, I said, rising calmly. Thank you for 17 years of experience. I didn't forget to lift my bag and walk away. No tears. No yelling. No begging. I knew something in me had shifted. I walked back into the office with a faint smile on my lips, not because I was happy, but because I had chosen not to give anyone the chance to see me break. Everyone knew I had just been called to James's office. A few curious glances drifted my way, others filled with concern. I felt them like small ripples on water, waiting for a stronger wind to stir them into waves. My desk looked exactly as it had that morning. The coffee cup was still half full, the report still open, and the photo of me with my parents in Central Park, taken in 2007, still sat neatly in its silver frame. I stared at them for a few seconds, then opened the drawer and pulled out a cardboard box I'd kept just in case I ever needed to move desks. Ironically, it had never been used until today. I began packing my things carefully and methodically. No rush. No panic. Each item was a memory. The Montblanc pen I was gifted when I signed my first major project deal. The birthday card from HR 3 years ago. And the USB drive full of reports I'd spent countless late nights completing. Lisa. I looked up. It was Maya, the intern I had mentored since her very first day. Her voice trembled. They let you go? I nodded slightly. Yeah. I was cut. Because my salary was too high. Maya's face fell. But you're the one who kept this entire department running. Every process, every financial plan, everything came from you. I gave her a sad smile. Sometimes companies don't care who does the work. They only care how much it costs them. A few more colleagues began to approach. Some kept their distance, watching silently. Others walked up to hug me, whispering their goodbyes. Not a single mid-level manager came by. No formal explanation. It was as if I had never existed in the company's glossy success story. I clicked log out on my company email even though I knew it had already been deactivated. The act felt like a quiet goodbye to myself, to the pride I once carried here. Then I picked up the cardboard box and walked through the familiar hallways I had passed 1,000 times before. But this time, every step echoed like a farewell knock, slow, heavy final. When I reached the lobby, I paused and turned to look back. The building stood there, tall and indifferent. People kept moving, their lives uninterrupted. But inside me, something had stirred awake. An idea. A plan. And as I stepped through the front doors, I quietly told myself, next Monday will be the beginning. The next morning, a new beginning in motion. The next morning, I sat in my small sunlit kitchen, hands wrapped around a white ceramic mug that read, "Do it with passion or not at all." My laptop was still open from the night before when I had typed the first lines of a new chapter in my life. I logged into LinkedIn. My profile headline had been updated. Former senior finance manager open to new challenges. No fluff. No sugarcoating. I didn't need to embellish anything. 17 years of experience in the industry, over 50 projects both big and small, hundreds of hours spent presenting to executive boards, and a team I had once led now scattered across the financial sector. 20 minutes later, the first notification popped up. A connection request. Ethan Morgan, CEO at Norwin Tech Solutions. I remembered him. We had worked together on a merger deal 5 years ago. Back then, I led the financial analysis and he was the strategic advisor on the other side. We respected each other and I knew Ethan wasn't the type to connect for mere formalities. Immediately after I accepted the request, a message appeared. Ethan. Lisa, just saw your update. I can't believe they let you go so foolishly. Call me when you're free. I have a proposal. I stared at that message for a long moment. Not because I was surprised, but because I had forgotten how warm it could feel to be recognized for my true worth. I typed back. I'll be free in 30 minutes. Zoom call. 30 minutes later, I was facing Ethan through the screen. He looked the same, slightly tousled brown hair, a warm but firm voice. Lisa, he began, I want you to be the chief financial officer for Norwin's global expansion project. I need someone who doesn't just know the numbers, but who has instinct, strength, and stability. You've got all three. I raised an eyebrow. Which project? Ethan shared his screen. Numbers, regional maps, growth projections, and financial strategies filled the display. Everything was professional, thorough. But what caught my attention wasn't the data, it was the way he spoke to me. As a peer. As an equal. I don't want you just for finance, Ethan added. I want you at the strategy table. I want your voice. Your decisions. As for compensation, name your number. I won't let talent be undervalued again. I paused for a few seconds. My thoughts weren't about money but about something deeper, dignity, value, and the chance to do what I do best in a place where it's acknowledged. I'll need a week to think it over, I said. There are some personal matters I need to sort out. Ethan nodded. Next Monday, I'll be waiting for your answer. I ended the call and leaned back in my chair. My hand reached for the photo frame of my mother on the shelf. She had once told me, never let anyone else define your worth. I smiled, not because of the tempting offer, but because I had just secured a powerful piece for my next Monday plan. I didn't rush to respond to Ethan. What I needed now wasn't a new job, it was preparation. A deliberate plan. A quiet, powerful counterattack that would make the people who treated me like expired inventory remember my name with regret. That afternoon, I called Jonathan, my trusted attorney, who had represented me in several financial deals in the past. Lisa, he sounded surprised. It's been a while. What's going on? Do you have an hour? I need to talk about the termination clauses in my employment contract. My voice was calm, but my resolve was unmistakable. An hour later, I sat across from Jonathan at his law office. He flipped through the old contract I brought along, his brow furrowing as he read the sections on staff reduction and individual performance evaluation. This is a serious issue, Jonathan said slowly. They failed to provide the required notice. And the reason for termination? Too vague. Your salary is too high isn't a legally valid justification, unless there's solid evidence of poor performance. And from what I recall, you were still the highest performing member of the finance department. I nodded. Exactly. I've got quarterly reports, internal feedback, and even a commendation email from just 3 months ago. Jonathan smiled. Perfect. Then next Monday, we'll send a pre-litigation settlement demand. They'll have 2 choices, either offer fair compensation or we see them in court. I stood and shook his hand. Thank you. I don't want a war. I just want fairness, and for them to understand you don't throw people away like used paper. That night, I did one more thing. I opened my personal email and began composing a message. Recipients: Maya and Gwen, Paul Landon, Christina Rossi. Former colleagues, some now department heads, even VPs. Subject line: if one day you become the next one, be ready. In the email, I didn't badmouth anyone. I simply told the story, quoted James verbatim, and left a few final lines as a message. No one is irreplaceable, that's what they say. But injustice doesn't stay hidden forever. Keep records of your contributions because you never know when you'll need them. After I hit send, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not because I expected anyone to take my side, but because I knew I was no longer standing in silence. I returned to an old project I had always wanted to pursue but never had the time for, a digital platform to help middle-aged women navigate career transitions. It was an idea I'd long nurtured, and now it stirred to life like a fresh gust of wind. I opened my laptop, began sketching wireframes, scanned through my personal budget spreadsheet, and quietly typed the tagline. For those who've been called too old, too expensive, too outdated. I knew I was on the right path. And just as I suspected, next Monday won't just be exciting, it will be a statement. Monday. The air was colder than usual. A light drizzle swept across the tall glass windows of the city's high-rises, as if signaling that something was shifting slowly, but inevitably. I wore my favorite navy blue blazer, stepped out of the taxi, and stood before the headquarters of my former company. I no longer had a staff badge to scan at the gate, but I didn't need one. I had scheduled a meeting with the legal department and they had agreed to meet in person, under the title Post-Employment Benefits Consultation. But what I truly came for was upstairs, the top floor, where the big conference room sat, alongside James's office. Jonathan was with me, carrying two thick folders. One was a formal letter of reconciliation, stamped by the law office. The other was a comprehensive record of my contributions and achievements over the past 17 years, undeniable and irrefutable. As we entered the meeting room, the air grew heavy. In addition to James, there was a blonde woman in a tailored suit, the company's in-house legal representative, and an HR assistant I knew all too well, Meredith. James forced a polite smile, but I didn't care. I wasn't there for pleasantries. I was there to reclaim my dignity. Jonathan began the meeting with a calm, professional tone. We believe the termination of Ms. Lisa Davis violates at least 3 clauses in her employment contract and 2 provisions under state labor law. We are fully prepared to take legal action should a mutual agreement not be reached. James leaned back in his chair, his face paling slightly. He hadn't expected me to take it this far. But I had always known sometimes what makes a woman break her silence after 17 years isn't money. It's the insult left unspoken. I don't want a lawsuit, I said, speaking for the first time. I want a public apology, a fair severance package, and a formal letter affirming my professional contributions and ethics to attach to my personal record. Meredith nodded, sneaking a glance at James. He hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. We can consider it. Jonathan slid the file across the table. We request the company's response within 3 business days. If not, we will proceed to court and release the full story to the press. It wasn't a threat. It was a clear invitation. And James knew if this went public, he wouldn't just lose face. He might lose his seat altogether. As I exited the building, I didn't look back. There was no need. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Lisa, I'm looking forward to your answer. The position is still waiting for the right person. I replied. I accept. But I want full authority over the finance team. And one final condition: I get to develop my own project under Norwin's brand, as long as it's outside the core business. It took a few minutes for Ethan to respond, and when the message came, I nearly laughed out loud. Full authority. No limits. Welcome aboard, Lisa Davis, future co-founder. The wind brushed gently against my coat. And in the soft drizzle, I didn't feel cold anymore. Norwin Tech's office sat in a modern building along the edge of the Hudson River, with floor-to-ceiling glass panels that offered a sweeping, vibrant view of the city. It wasn't a place that flaunted power like my former company. It was a space designed to spark inspiration, creativity, vision, and people. Everything here was in motion. I walked into the office on Monday morning, exactly 1 week after being fired. But this time, no one averted their gaze. No one avoided acknowledging my presence. They welcomed me as a collaborator, an integral part of the expansion plan Ethan had once spoken about. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. Ethan stepped out of a meeting, smiling as he extended his hand to me. Lisa, welcome to a place where talent is valued at its true worth. I smiled and shook his hand. And where people aren't judged by the size of their paycheck. We took a tour around the office. He introduced me to the core team, young, driven, yet they listened to me with sincere respect. They knew who I was. They had read my CV, followed the deals I'd led. More importantly, they wanted to learn from Minute Compete, not tiptoe around. In the strategy room, I presented my 3-month financial restructuring plan, a plan I had finished preparing the night before. There were no doubtful glances, no interruptions. When I finished, the room stayed silent for a moment before Ethan nodded. We've got ourselves a true financial leader. But the best part of the day wasn't in the meetings or the handshakes. It came from something I hadn't yet shared with anyone in the company. After hours, I stayed behind in the office. I personally connected the servers to the side project I had once mentioned to Ethan, MentorBridge, a platform to connect middle-aged women who had been laid off, were transitioning careers, or simply wanted to start over with seasoned mentors like myself. Not for profit, but for purpose. I had once been one of them, and if I could step into the light, I would bring others with me. The first interface lit up. The welcome message appeared on the screen like a personal note to every woman who had ever been made to feel disposable. No one has the right to discard you. You're not in Dingery simply changing trains. And the next stop belongs to you. I hit save, closed my laptop, and walked out as the city lights flickered to life. The cool New York night breeze fluttered my coat like a quiet reminder that a new journey had truly begun. I was no longer the woman who got fired for making too much money. I was the woman redefining her worth, and taking it farther than anyone had ever imagined. 1 month later, I received an email from Meredith, my former HR assistant. The subject line was cold but commanding. Update regarding reconciliation file and performance acknowledgement. I opened it. The body was long, filled with cautious, legally phrased language, but the message was clear. The company had agreed to issue a post-termination compensation package, along with a formal letter recognizing my professional accomplishments, its wording stronger and more dignified than any award. No apology. But that was fine. I never needed an apology from people who bowed only to power, not to principle. I forwarded the email to Jonathan with a short note. This is done. Next, MentorBridge needs a trademark. MentorBridge had begun to grow faster than I had imagined. Just 3 weeks into the beta launch, hundreds of messages from women across the U.S. had poured in. They were accountants, administrative assistants, production supervisors, even nurses who'd left the field after the pandemic, all asking the same question. Where do I start again? I began hosting Zoom mentoring sessions every Thursday night, each lasting 2 hours. No fees. No ads. Just honest human conversations from someone who had once fallen into the dark. I'm not here to help you find a job, I said one evening, voice calm and steady. I'm here to help you realize you're not broken. You were just placed in the wrong spot. A 52-year-old woman in Arizona cried when she heard that. A single mom from Ohio sent me a nearly 3-page email describing how she once hid from her children the fact that she'd been fired. They didn't need miracles. They just needed a hand to help them stand back up. And I was ready to be that hand, not for recognition, but because I knew what it felt like to have your opportunities and dignity stripped away. One late afternoon, as I was leaving the Norwin office, I saw James, my former CEO, standing alone near the subway entrance. He was dressed casually, holding a worn leather bag, his face looking more tired than I remembered. He saw me too. No words. No greetings. But his eyes, once so dismissive, now held something else. Hesitation. Maybe even regret. I gave a small nod as if to say, I'm no longer the burden you once believed me to be. Then I walked on without looking back. MentorBridge officially became a distinct arm under the Norwin brand. I retained full executive control, and Ethan had become the most trusted collaborator I'd ever had in my professional life. Sometimes I sit alone and reflect on that fateful day, the day I was fired for making too much money. Had it never happened, I might still be quietly eroding my worth beneath layers of office dust, waiting for validation from people who never intended to give it. But now, I am the one redefining the meaning of value. I am the one who built my own seat, instead of waiting for a place at someone else's table. And just as I told myself that day, next Monday will be interesting. I just never imagined it would be the beginning of something this extraordinary.